you know, when you're looking at RGB, it always seems like the new, coolest, trending thing, but a little too much. But ultimately, there's a very finite way to do lighting. And what we're going to talk about today is how you can make that lighting fit the scene that you're working with. And so today, I'm going to turn it over to you, Gaelen, and you give this set the color it deserves.
Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Gaelen Cook. Yes, like Galen Weston, but I don't price fix bread. Thank you for laughing at my joke. I'm a gaffer and cinematographer from Toronto. I've found myself shooting a lot more of like stylized feature-length comedies, which is a very oddly specific thing. I'm going to just go quickly through a couple of things because I do know that it is a little later and some people gotta go home. But we're gonna do things a little bit swiftly about how we are going to start lighting the scene and then how we can add color, and then I'm gonna actually finish it off with a little bit of color theory just to quickly give you guys some really nice primers. So the best thing about having fixtures being RGB, because before, if it was bicolor, it can't be, sorry about that. So if it's either one color or the other, I don't really want it on my set. I need the flexibility of bicolor. Now, because of RGB, it allows us to have a lot more control and speed over a lot of things. So firstly, for any interior scene, your first brush stroke should be your outside source. That's going to be the thing that really lays the groundwork for everything. We're gonna shut that one off. So usually when I fire up a source, I don't keep it tungsten. I'm gonna choose a color like green, if you mind doing that. So that way I can immediately know where it's hitting. Because I might have other sources, I might have the sun. So I know that I'm actually hitting the wall where I want to focus it. So now if I could have that rotated slightly to hit our lovely gentleman. What was your name again? Adam, lovely Adam. Thank you so much for sitting in, Adam. Just so I can see that it's actually giving him the backlight I need, as you can check on the monitor. Great, and because we have that brush stroke in, we can actually change it more to a daylight or more of a moody blue. So once that gets locked in, we'll go for that moody blue. There we go, we'll keep it there. Great, awesome. And then if we can just fire up our second brush stroke here. Apologies. If we can start that off with just some tungsten, that'd be great. So for the average scene, this kind of works out. We don't really need to push too much color. Thank you. But if you want to just do a little bit of stylization, just to add that extra layer, I tend to keep every fixture in HSI. So it's just slightly desaturated. So if we could go to maybe a sodium vapor on both these guys and our lamp, it's still tungsten, but the camera is going to read it slightly more colorful. So we currently have the camera at 43, so we're still going to get that split. Just let me know when that's good. Great. And then if we could change the backlight to a cyan, that'd be great. So for most things, this is actually going to be fairly enough once that gets done, just to hit the sensor. But the point is, you just want to get a little subtlety of the color hitting the sensor. We don't want to overload it when we're just doing these subtle pushes. Howdy. What's your favorite mix for Moonlight? My favorite mix for Moonlight on an LED fixtures, or what's my overall? Overall, I prefer tungsten with a CTB gel because tungsten gives a little bit more of an actual natural spread. However, unfortunately, the logistics of indie filmmaking, which is my world, don't really offer that as well. So we are mostly bouncing maybe a larger LED fixture into an ultra bounce to get that active spread. Yeah. So when you're in the HSI mode, most of the time, they tend to just up the SAT to 100%. The unfortunate problem with that is when you up the SAT at 100%, it does tend to mess with the camera sensors because they are computers. They will get confused. So when you tend to use your color saturation, you want to try to stick between a 75 to 85. Anything above 85, it can come off a little too much. Like I joke and say baby's first RGB light. I think we all used to play with those. You would have the dial spinning and we have a really fun time. But yeah, so when you bring this into color, we are able to not blow out the sensor in terms of the actual color in the back, because you still want to give a little bit of flexibility for that. So for most times, this little bit of elevated stylization is enough for your average movie. However, if we're going to get a little hyper stylized, you do need to bring in a little bit of color theory. So basically, if you mind making the backlight red, that'd be lovely. So warmer colors are going to be pushed to the front of the frame. That's the first thing your brain is going to come to. And then if we can get the top light to be more of a blue. And blue tends to recede. So if you're trying to make something a little bit more prominent in the frame, warmer colors, more of a red, more of your oranges and warm. And if we're trying to push things away, more of the colder. Just a few little more things is that not all RGB chips are made equal. Most fixtures are going to have maybe 3-4 colors they are extremely good at. And the rest, they're going to struggle bus a little bit. So as long as you understand your fixtures, you can understand and see that, sometimes the blue hue in this particular fixture isn't going to be as crisp as maybe the orange or as maybe the red. It really starts getting a little bit more funky when you're hitting your greens and your purples because of the quicker wavelength.
I'm curious, so
yes.
in a setup like this, how would you create more separation if we had like a bigger room, or let's say if you were in a diner? How would you add that separation and contrast in a large environment?
Yeah, when you're having a larger environment, first I always like talking with my DP to ensure what's being seen, what's going to be bouncing off walls, what are we actually looking at here, because there's no point in me trying to really judge up a corner if we don't. If we're going to add a little bit more saturation, I always recommend looking at your basic color theories. My personal favorite is using split contrast, because unfortunately everyone loves their teal and orange. Everyone loves their teal and orange.
Shout on every video I have on Vimeo.
You mean the Blornge. The Blornge look is great. Yeah. So when you're using your split complementary, you basically are taking your blue and then you ditch the orange, but you use the two next to it. So you're using more of the purple and the yellow side. So you're actually going to be adding that contrast that you would get without actually just doubling down on your basic concepts. As well as the second you take a warmer and cooler color, you're adding immediately more contrast because of the layer difference. Oh, apologies. So if you're wanting to add a lot more contrast, it's very common to have your front light be one color, your back light be another color. You're just gonna push a little bit more of that contrast as well.
Now, if you were doing a scene, we're talking about RGB specifically, but how would you do a scene where you mix in a little bit of color? Let's say, if we were going for like a moonlight look, but not full RGB, how would you, decipher that in pre-production with the DP to go over that?
For me, I'm a huge reference person. I always tend to pull more from animation myself than live action footage, because it's always easier to pull back to reality then push the envelope of the references on the table. So usually I always have a front conversation. There's a night scene. What do you want the moonlight to be? We can be completely Archie Comics cyan, or we can be super muted blue, super gray. That tends to be one of the big things that everyone needs to talk about, because I need to know what your moonlight is, because usually we're using plastics. We don't get to fully have everything RGB. So specifically, I'm finding more everyone wants to be just slightly on the cyan side, but not aggressive. So it's more like a 50% cyan sat is what most DPs are sitting at the current that I'm working with.
And would you say, like, if you were doing RGB, you would have kind of your color palettes picked ahead of time with the director?
Yes, usually I'm a huge person on the lookbook is gospel, the lookbook is Bible. That is kind of knowing what you're going in that's how you got to plan it. Like RGB lighting gives you a lot of flexibility to be creative on the day, but you have to kind of know where you're going in the plan. Usually certain scenes are always talked about first. There's a club scene, I always have a 100% flat out conversation. I'm like, do you want bisexual lighting? Because that is all I'm getting called for. I would rather maybe you guys push for this. I've been a real big fan of trying to do with like a green-yellow split, because not everyone's been doing that. It's a lot different. It's a little bit more eye-catching. As well as everything has to relate back to the story. Like, this is great for photography and stuff, but if it's not helping the story,
yeah, what's the motivation?
It's not there. Like, most people will will be like, because it looks cool, and it's a great way to talk about it, but you have to bring it back to storytelling, because we are storytellers. That is just how our medium works. So every now and then, I always try to have a quick chat. How far are we pushing the colors? How is it relating back to the story? And which palette would you prefer? Some directors are super hands-on with their palettes. I've had directors I've worked with where yellow consistently has to mean one thing. So anytime we are in one situation, yellow has to be present. Bar's not, it just has to be. And if I forget yellow, I messed up. The whole color story of the movie doesn't work.
What are some things, like when we get away from the idea of plastics and gels, what are some things you have to be conscious of the newer LED style lights?
There's the chipset having its strengths and weaknesses. You'll find certain brands really excel at one color wavelength and the other brands don't. It's kind of just more of a figure out what's going to work with your workflow kind of deal. I also just don't think plastics are going to go anywhere in terms of the grand scheme of things, because of just the spectral fingerprint of getting a particular color. For me, very famous Lee Jade, I always have it on the truck, and I still, for the life of me, I think I've tried 17 different fixtures. I cannot get anything to look the same way as that gel.
Wow.
No matter how hard I try, it's so particular. It's like a green teal, which many people we've been mostly using for clubs, overhead lights and clubs, just taping them over tubes.
So I'm curious, how do you mix the world of being able to access RGB lights with using practical fixtures that you were going to have to gel anyways? How do you balance the two of those?
Yeah, it's one. I try my best. Sometimes your color meter is just not going to be as accurate as we want to. I love these companies. It's just one of those things. Just what your eye sees, what the meter sees, and what the camera sees are completely different, and they don't actually talk to each other. So the camera's king. It's whatever is coming through the sensor is that, as well as you're getting into different sciences of how the rendering order of the lens. If you take a elderly lens, that's vintage as the kids call it, the vintage lenses will have different rendering orders because of tri-strip film. It'll render red first instead of red last.
So would you go into pre-production testing some of the fixtures that you might implement on a set?
I try to, however, unfortunately, with indie filmmaking being as fast as it is, you rarely get that. I sometimes don't even get prep at a prep bay in terms of like which fixtures, hooking them up. Sometimes I'm in the back of the truck, hooking everything up to DMX, in the moment, trying my best to do it. And I know, I wish it was different, but sometimes it's just on the fly, trying to figure things out.
Let's wrap it up with a final thought. Do you think that RGB lighting is going to be as trendy as people make it out to be?
I don't think it's a trend. I think it's here to stay.
Okay.
Specifically, it's also just like sped up my workflow. Like when I mentioned at the beginning, I will have every Moonlight or every outside source, my first brushstroke is always green. I put a green gel on it, or I crank it to green. I just need to know where it's hitting, and what is actual sunlight, and what is spilling through, and what is my light. And then once we've discovered that, gel comes off, it goes back. So occasionally I've had a couple of producers over looking at Video Village being like, what in the hell are you guys doing?
So you're just doing those little tests to just make sure that things are looking the way
things are hitting where it needs to be, because it's just easier to see the color than that of anything on the Kelvin scale.
Interesting. All right, well, I mean, thank you. This is honestly like the world of RGB seems like a world where you have to really practice it. It's not like throwing up a fixture in a traditional sense. Like you really have to understand how colors are going to mix, on the camera that you're going to use. So
Yeah, it's very much akin to the sensor and the color science of the camera being chosen, specifically as well.
awesome. Thank you.
No worries, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
And on that note, I'm going to leave the floor open for any questions that people have. If you want to come and see one of the fixtures or ask a specific question to Gaelen, she's going to hang out for a few minutes longer. Thank you all for being here. On behalf of my team at Set Ready, if you are interested in anything you saw today, please come and talk to me or someone from the team, or send me a message on Instagram. What we're trying to do here is build a community, and I want to thank each of you for sticking around or coming, and it means a lot to me that we can see something like this grow in a community like Hamilton, and bring people together from all walks of life. And hopefully, if everyone enjoyed today, we'll be doing more of these in the future. So thank you guys for coming.
Thank you so much, Dave.